Slushes.
I could totally see myself drinking this on a boat.
Oh, yeah.
Without question, one of the most popular, and rightly so, places in Chattanooga is the Walnut Street Bridge. But many people watching this morning, certainly if you are new to town, might not know the full story of what happened at one time on the Walnut Street Bridge and the significance it plays not just in our lives here in Chattanooga, but in the nation as a whole. Donivan Brown certainly knows the story, and he very proudly this morning joins us talking about a weekend coming up beginning September 16th that will finally honor the life and the legacy of Ed Johnson. Good to see you this morning, Donivan.
Julie, it's good to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
You know, I am not a native of Chattanooga, and so the Ed Johnson story was not something I even, Donivan, became familiar with probably until 5 or 6 years ago, and I've lived here for 23 years. So the fact that this has become more and more publicly acknowledged, and now finally we're at the point of having this memorial dedicated, I think is a very exciting thing.
Julie, you're not alone. Like, I moved to Chattanooga when I was a little kid, and I didn't hear the story to myself until roughly 5 or 6 years ago, though there were those in the city, within the county as well, who carried the story of what happened to Ed Johnson and the other men who were lynched in Hamilton County from one generation into the next. And I was someone who would routinely go on the bridge, perhaps even 10 times a month. It's lovely views, it's great to walk it, and it has a festive feel. There are a lot of folks out there. And then once I heard about the story of what happened to Ed Johnson, one is I was shocked. It was dumbfounding to me that I could have lived here nearly all of my life and never heard about this. And believe it or not, I actually stopped crossing the bridge. I will enter the periphery of the bridge, but I won't cross it any longer. And I didn't so much decide to do that. The story became so integrated into my soul that I didn't cross anymore. And there are folks who don't cross that bridge as well. And it was in early 1906, a brutal crime was committed against a young woman named Nevada Taylor. And ultimately, Ed Johnson was falsely accused after a reward went out. And those who follow along know that it was a sham trial, that it was certainly not a jury of his peers. There were no black folks in the jury. His family couldn't even enter the courthouse during the trial. And there were multiple attempts on his life while he was actually in jail in Chattanooga. Lo and behold, he was convicted of a crime, despite the fact that he had 12 witnesses that said he was on the other side of town at his job. And ultimately, he decided to appeal his case because his father had hope, and he reached out to African-American attorneys, Noah Parton and Stiles Hutchins, and ultimately one of them argued before the Supreme Court, and Justice Harlan heard the case and provided a stay of execution. And shortly thereafter, the region and the state and the city saw that as a provocation. This was 50 years after the Civil War, and there was still this fundamental debate between federal oversight and the role of the states. And the courthouse was left, where Ed Johnson was jailed, left with only one person, a 70-year-old man, to protect him. All the other folks in the jail were moved out. And on the evening of March 19th, a mob broke in, and over 1,000 people were there on the Walnut Street Bridge when his body was hoisted up. But just before they lynched him, they provided him an opportunity to confess his sins. And his final words were, "God bless you all, I'm innocent." And not only did they lynch him, but they shot him with numbers of bullets. And then one of the bullets caught the rope and it snapped, and his body fell to the ground. And then another man walked up to him and shot him in the head. A painful, awful tragedy. The Supreme Court wasn't happy. Therefore, they sent down the Secret Service to investigate it, and there was a trial. The sheriff Ship was actually convicted of contempt of court, got some jail time, but came back a hero. And I think there are things that a society doesn't recognize or grieve, that they haunt us. It's as if a loved one had died and there was no funeral. And I think that when we've gotten to the practice of hiding sins, that there are things that aren't brought to the light. And I think that the ghosts of old are still amongst us. And I think that, I hope that as a city, as a county, we can be free from our past sins.
You know, I'm sitting here listening to you, Donivan, and the story you just told, the truth you just told, is not new to me. I've heard it before. You captured it in a way, though, with an emotion that I haven't really heard before, and maybe that will be the power of what's going to take place the weekend of September 16 to 19, because you brought it to today. You made it, how can anyone not imagine being in that position and the cruelty of that to happening, and not see how we have to remember, no matter what race we are, we have to remember the humanity that we are.
Well, Julie, that's very kind of you to say. Absolutely. I know that for some within our city, or even the country, there's this desire that we forget the past. And people from different communities can have the very same feeling about forgetting the past, or are concerned about what it brings up. And my hope is, our belief is that it brings up freedom. And I think that when we hide ourselves from the truth, when we try to bury the truth in gravesite, I think it comes up out and it yearns for justice. And indeed, the 16th is coming up, and the theme for our weekend is courage, truth, and the freedom to imagine a new America. And we understand that it does at times take a lot of courage and strength to remember the painful things from our past. And the same is true for us individually. There's things that I've done that I'm ashamed of. There's things that we all do that we're ashamed of. There's certainly things from within our moment that we are not proud of our country for doing. And as well, I think for many, this is a very shameful element of our region's past, of our city's past. However, I think it's never too late to reckon with wrong. And there are folks who see a bridge, and bridges have a unique place in human history. There are two sides there's a gap in between, and the bridge is designed and built so that folks from both sides can walk across together, and that it's a means of travel that we can traverse together. And I think there's some as well who feel as if we confront our past, all of the good of our society will be vanquished, it'll be lost. But our memorial is almost complete. We're days away from it being finished. And all of Chattanooga has not fallen to some sinkhole. We're still here. And I think it suggests that the better we can deal with our past, the more freed up we can be to deal with the complicated issues that are facing our society today. And our kickoff event is the 16th at the Hunter. The artist, designer, will be on site. His name is Jerome Meadows from Savannah, Georgia, and he'll be speaking to us about himself, his process, and the significance of his memorial from the vantage point of the art.
So let me do this, Donivan. There is far more than we have time to get into. That's just one of the many great events taking place over this 3-day period. The easiest thing for people to do is to go to the website. They can also find the Ed Johnson Project on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. Learn more not only about what's happening this September 16th through the 19th, but the story behind this and the hope that we can all find as we don't necessarily look back to the past, as Donivan said, but what we learn from this to take into the future. Thank you so very much for your time this morning, Donivan, and for the work you've done.
Thank you so much, Julie.
We all have accidents, but would you clean your